So today I will walk you through some topic about the COVID-19 in Cambodia. First, let's look at the overview of the situation. And the second one, we will look at the channel of the economic impact on Cambodia. And the third one, what are the impact of COVID-19 on the economic sector? The fourth one is looking at the result based on the computable general equilibrium modeling, and what would be the impact of COVID-19 on GDP growth, poverty, and unemployment. And then we will examine some impact on some social sector, and then followed by the government response so far. And then I will provide a little bit overview of the UN social and economic response plan. So this graph presents you about the situation of COVID-19 in Cambodia. So far, we have a total of 273 cases reported in the country, but most of the cases are imported. So far we do not have any local outbreak of any major local transmission. So basically, we are somehow, even though the risk is still high, but the situation is still, if I use the health expert term, we are still in stage 1. And this graph basically just to give you a quick capture of the kind of, we have two waves. The first wave is in March, that we have a lot of cases, but almost all of them are imported. And then the second wave is in July. That's also due to the kind of, we have a more flight from other countries, so that we have more imported case. But so far in Cambodia, we do not have any major local infection. So again, that's I would like to try to emphasize that. And these, let's look at the channels through which the COVID-19 can impact the Cambodian economy. As some of you may know, that Cambodia is a small open economy with narrow economic base. Basically, we depend on 4 major sectors. The first one is the garment sector. The second one is tourism. The third one is construction, and the fourth one is agriculture. But so far, agriculture sector has performed poorly in the past several years. So basically, we depend on the garment export, especially to the US and EU markets, and also depends on the international tourist arrivals in the country. So in the absence of the major outbreak in the country, the economic impact on Cambodia basically through the external demand shock. So the decline in the demand for garment export, as well as the decline in the international tourist visit in Cambodia. So far, it's like the international tourist has almost disappeared in the first half of the years. And another factor is the slowing down of the capital inflow, such as foreign direct investment, FDI. And because of this direct impact on the major economic sector, such as garment, tourism, and some impact on the construction sector as well, it's also have the knock-on effect on the other major economic sector because of the lower income and aggregate demand. And again, because of the narrow economic base, that the country depends on a few economic sector to support growth. So there is no alternative source of value addition or growth. So that's make the economy very vulnerable, and also experience a very devastating impact from COVID-19. So let's move to the impact of COVID-19 on the major economic sector. So first look at the garment industry. As of July 2020, this year, about 400 factories have partially or fully suspended their operation. So this has affected 150,000 workers. So it's approximately 16% of the employment in this sector. So there's a major loss of the job. And because garment industry has a lot of backward and forward linkages with other sectors, so it also have a lot of a huge spillover effect. And also another important point that I should note is that the garment worker, they also send the remittance to support their family back home, their parents back home in the home village. So this group of people is also impacted by this COVID-19. And for the tourism sector, for the first half of this year, we seen that the international tourist arrival have dropped dramatically by about 65% compared to the same period last year. And more than 3,000 tourism establishments such as restaurants, hotels has closed their operation, and so it caused a loss of 110,000 jobs. So that's big numbers for the Cambodian economy. And for the construction sector, similarly, we have seen the slowdown in economic activity during the first half of this year. And based on some indicators such as the import of steel and construction material, we have seen the decline of about 46% and 25% respectively. So these are the three major economic sectors that are directly impacted by the COVID-19 due to the collapse in the demand. For this table, basically it indicates the assumption that we use to project the impact of COVID-19 on the Cambodian economy using the computable general equilibrium model. So we have the major assumption. The first one is the duration of the global outbreak, and the second one is the impact on the garment sector, to what extent the export demand has dropped. And the second one is the construction sector. Another one is hotel and restaurant, that is the tourism sector, and transportation and communication, and also the agriculture sector. So these are the basic assumption that we use to run the simulation using the computable general equilibrium model. And then we have the business as usual BAU case that based on the government Ministry of Economy and Finance MEF frameworks, that the base GDP growth is about 6.5%. And then we have the expected case and the high case. The expected case, that's mean scenario, for example, the 20% drop in the demand for the government export. So what would be the impact across the economy? Yeah, what would be the impact on GDP growth, on poverty rate and unemployment? So that's this table shows us. So similarly, high case like that, but it's the impact is higher. We expected it higher. And for the last two rows that I highlighted, that means we also run other simulation to see what would be the impact if the government introduce fiscal policy. For example, if the government allocated the 1.9% of GDP to social protection, for example, the cash transfer to the poor household, and the tax relief to some major economic sector, and because the government also make saving from their planned budget from the beginning of the years. So what would be the impact on the economy? And another scenario that we have is that based on the government program above and with the UN proposal, because we advocate with the government to increase the spending for social protection, such as cash transfer to the poor household and to the we call them missing middle, that's the worker, the self-employed worker, or the worker who work in the informal sector, such as SME, that like a previous speaker has talked about. So what would be the impact on the economy? How it address the impact by COVID-19? So now let's look at the result based on the CGE model, and we can see that this is the baseline result that what would happen to the economy due to this COVID-19. We can see that the for the expected case, the economy is expected to contract by 4.1%. That is very big for Cambodia. In the past 20 years, we have never experienced that a huge contraction. Even during the global financial crisis in 2008-2009, the Cambodian economy could grow about 0.1%, but not negative. But for this time, we expect the economy to contract by minus 4.1%. And this graph, basically, I want to provide a comparison of the GDP growth projection by various institutions. We can see that from the beginning of the year, the initial projection by various institutions such as the Asian Development Bank, ADB, IMF, Ministry of Economy and Finance, Moody's, the UN, ourselves, and World Bank, we project the economy to grow around 6.5%. But then because of the COVID-19, all the institutions have revised down their projection to the negative territory. That's the economy is in contraction, and ADB projected that the economy will contract around 5.5%. That is quite higher, even higher than our projection. But the other institution, because of their projection is a bit earlier, so they may have less information, but because ADB is the latest projection available. And now going back again, based on the CGE model result, we can see the impact on poverty rate. It almost doubled from the baseline about less than 10% to 17.6%. And the unemployment rate also expected to increase from very low base of 0.7% to 4.8%. So there's a huge impact on the Cambodian economy. And here is the result of the CGE simulation that when we introduced the stimulus, how the stimulus have impact across the economy and how it responds to the COVID-19 impact. So recall that from our scenarios, the government basically have a budget cut of 1.2% of GDP compared to their plan from the beginning of the year. That means it's not comparing to last year. It's not comparing to 2019. If we compare to 2019, the government budget this year is actually a lot higher than last year. But because of the COVID-19, the government have saved from some government plan expenditures like capital investment from various line ministry. So when they save a lot of money, even though they reallocate to increase spending in other areas such as the social protection, they still have kind of a lot more savings. So compared to this initial planning, it's kind of a budget cut of 1.2% GDP. So given this assumption that the GDP growth drop further, a little bit further to minus 4.4%, but the poverty rate has improved by 1 percentage point because of the increased spending in the social protection. But unemployment rate, we should expect it's also slightly worsened by 0.2 percentage points because of the drop in the GDP growth. And then we look at the another scenario that based on the previous government program, and then we add the UN proposal to increase spending in social protection. So the government budget is going to be to increase to 3.1% of GDP. So what would be the impact? So we can see that it has improved the GDP growth, even though it's not much, it's just around 0.8 percentage point. So that the economy may just contract by around minus 3.3%. But it has a significant positive impact on the poverty rate. It has improved a lot by 3.4 percentage point. And unemployment rate has improved slightly by 0.4 percentage point. This slide basically to provide some information about the impact on the social sector. So again, as the poverty rate is expected to almost double from the baseline of less than 10% to 17.6%. This should be expected because for the Cambodian case, we have a lot of number of people that live near the poverty line. So even a small shock can make this group of people to fall back into poverty easily. And any type of shock, even the health shock, even the disaster, so it can make them fall back into poverty easily. And another very concern is that some of the poor households have applied some coping strategies, such as taking a more loan from bank or microfinance institution, or selling their possession asset, or resort to the reusing food consumption in their household. So that could have a negative implication for their long-term livelihood and development. And the health sector is expected to have a big burden as well, especially for children and women, because health outcome are also linked with the access to water and sanitation and hygiene, and more than about 3 million of people have still have access, still lack of access to the both facility and service. So that is a risk for this COVID-19 transmission as well. And also because of the stretched health system and the inadequate health professional, so and facility, so the health system is difficult to provide the essential health service to people. And we can see that the poverty rate may increase. That also has the implication for food security and nutrition. So that we expect to have that's a problem as well. And another important area is that the educational outcomes, such as academic performance and dropout rate, will deteriorate, because since March, the school has been closed nationwide in order to, that's kind of a health distancing measure to contain the COVID-19 transmission. So since March, the school has closed, so that about 3 million students have, even though 3.2 million of students have no proper learning since March. So even though the education system has shifted to the online learning system, but majority of the students, especially those living in the rural area, they do not have adequate facility to access the e-learning. And also it's also a problem, a challenge for the new teacher, that they are not familiar with this the online system, learning system. So this COVID-19 highlight the digital divide, the learning inequality, and it can has a long-term implication for the long-term country development that can affect the human capital in the country. And another area that could be impacted by this crisis is that the gender equality and women empowerment could be reversed because of the because of the closure of school, the burden of taking care children is at home. So fall on the women rather than men. So that the kind of further burden for women, and they have no time to do any other tasks or to even to do learning. So that's a big concern for us. So for this slide presents some of the government response so far. It doesn't. I should note that so far the government have introduced additional measure, but this what are the major economic measure that the government has taken so far. So on the first graph on the left, that is the spending package by the government that to support the poor household. That means the cash transfer to the poor household. And then they also provide the financing for the agricultural and rural development bank, and also the provide the cash forward program. That's mean provide the money to people who can work, like to build a canal or something in the rural areas, so that they got paid by that. And wage subsidy and training for the worker who lost their job, especially the worker in the garment and tourism sector. And also they also allocated the budget for the implementation of the COVID-19 master plan, that basically the plan to respond to the this health emergency. And they also provided tax relief for the affected sector, such as the garment and textile and hotel, restaurant, and real estate and casino as well. And also for the aviation sector as well. And the graph at the bottom basically to present about the government net fiscal position. Where is the government now? Basically, we can see that the government, on the one hand, need to increase the spending to support the poor household, to support the economy. But on the other hand, the government revenue also declined dramatically, because the major economic sector has been impacted. So you can see that the existing deficit, budget deficit, is just less than $2 billion US dollars. But because of the drop in the government revenue and the increased spending for the economic measure, the government budget is expected to have a larger deficit, to more than 3 billion US dollar. And here is the final slide of my presentation. I just provide a quick overview of the UN socio-economic response plan that the UN try to support the government to respond to this COVID-19 crisis and to recover from this crisis. So for the UN social and economic response plan, we have 5 pillars. The first one is health first. That means protecting the health system. Basically, all the health measures that are not in the response to COVID-19, basically protecting the overall health system. And the second one is protecting the people. That's mean introducing the measure to support the people, such as the social protection and other social service. And the third one is the economic response and recovery, such as the measure to support the restarting key economic sectors, such as the garment and tourism, and support the SME and skill development and training for the affected workers. And the fourth one is the macroeconomic response, basically to provide support to the government in terms of capacity in policy making, and also designing the stimulus policy and expanding the fiscal space for the government. And the fifth one, the last one, is promoting social cohesion and community resilience. So that's to support the local community and authority to respond to COVID-19, and introduce such as like social dialogue to minimize the impact from the COVID-19, because we can see that a large number of people have lost their job. And the last part supported the government. That's the four major areas that I have been working to support the government from the UN side. That's the first one is to provide the impact assessment of the social and economic impact of COVID-19 on Cambodia. And the second one is to provide technical assistance to the government in designing the fiscal policy response or stimulus. And the third one is to provide technical assistance in designing and implementing the cash transfer to the poor household. And the fourth one is also to support the government in developing a socio-economic recovery strategy, because we are now the situation is managed very well in terms of the COVID-19 situation, and the countries should move toward the recovery. So we should have this strategy in place to support the government. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.